Starting off our list, in our number 10 spot we have impeccable timing. Okay. This story is one that has quite the plot twist that I absolutely was not expecting. It reads, quote, "There is this one guy in my neighborhood. We seem to operate on the same schedule since we see each other at the bus stop almost every day. We never talk much, he always just asks me for a cigarette and I usually give him one. The problem is that I don't have a sensible schedule. My classes are at a different time every day and get rescheduled more often than not, and I make my own work hours, so I just come in whenever. Last time I saw him was a couple of hours ago. I'm walking home, middle of the night, and some guy jumps me from the back saying, 'Do you have a cigarette?' I turn around and it's the same guy just strolling around the neighborhood at 2:30 a.m. looking for somebody to lend him a smoke. My instincts are telling me that something is seriously wrong here, but what do you guys think? I don't feel like this is just a strange coincidence." In our number 9 spot today we have The Agent. This neighbor story comes from someone who lived in an apartment building and who had one neighbor who was exceptionally nosy and suspicious of others in the building. So much so that she decided to do something absolutely insane, which was to stage phone calls with FBI headquarters about other tenants in the building and what she called alarming behavior. This behavior she's referencing would have to be something super outlandish and crazy for her to go to those lengths, right? Oh no, we're talking like people coming home after 9 p.m. and she's like, better call the FBI. The story then continues on to say that she even went as far as to post a fake government notice on the walls of the building. This lady just will not quit. So, guess what made this lady stop all of her nonsense? Well, the storyteller decided to take a page out of her book and they staged a fake phone call. This time, they just loudly chatted about the illegalities of everything that this lady was doing, including her impersonation of an FBI agent. Who would have guessed? Shortly after this staged call, the neighbor lady stopped. In our number 8 spot today, we have Peeping Tom. Okay, so this one is truly one of the creepiest things I have ever heard. This story comes from a man who lives with his wife, and they have a downstairs neighbor who is certainly something else. First, this neighbor approaches the wife and says to her that he can hear her and her husband all the time, with a super creepy and sinister grin on his face, which is already absolutely horrifying to even think of. This is already enough to just give you the heebie-jeebies, but this story unfortunately gets worse. One day the wife was painting the porch of the house and accidentally dropped a paintbrush. She bent down to pick it up, and this is when she had to see what no one should have to see. Through the slits in the deck, she saw this creepy neighbor's eyes staring up at her. Tell me why this guy was just laying under the porch staring up at her, being a weirdo peeping Tom while she painted the porch. They have no idea how long he was there for, and honestly, they probably don't even want to know. In our number 7 spot today, we have The Next Door Dentist. This story comes from someone whose neighbor was a dentist and he lived with his wife, and they apparently had one kinda creepy child. Our storyteller explains that this weird family next door once absolutely freaked out at them for planting some flowers alongside their fence. They didn't go into detail about why, but the dentist's family screamed as they said they didn't want anyone digging up their land. That's a reasonable request for sure, but also a little suspicious. The dentist's family ended up moving out 2 years after this strange incident, and our storyteller didn't really think of them much until 3 years after that. In an absolutely wild but not surprising turn of events, the dentist dad ended up being arrested for kidnapping his patients. Our storyteller still has never had confirmation, but truly believes that there are still bodies located there on the property. In our number 6 spot today, we have Always Watching. This story is about the family that lived across the street from our storyteller when they were in high school. Our storyteller would walk to and from school every day, and while the mornings were normal, when he was coming home every day is when things got weird. This family across the street would sit and stare out the window at this guy every single day as he returned from school. I couldn't imagine this happening to me once, let alone every day. That truly sounds like an absolute nightmare. To make things just a little more strange, it apparently wasn't uncommon for them to get phone calls from their scary neighbor's phone number, but when they answered, there just wasn't anyone on the other line. I feel like I would have immediately put my house up for sale or something, because every night I would feel like I need to sleep with one eye open. In our number 5 spot today, we have The Cat Came Back. Okay, last time, on part 1, we had a weird neighbor cat story, and this time we have another one that is arguably weirder and creepier. I'm just saying, if you've got a cat and a strange neighbor, you might want to watch out, because these stories are putting me on edge. This one goes, quote, "There was an old man who lived next door to my last house. I'd wake up every morning to about an hour of 'here kitty kitty kitty.' My cat once went missing for about a week, and he came back with a shaved stomach." Listen, Without the whole neighbor part, that story would still be weird and concerning. I'm glad the cat came back, but why in the world was his stomach shaved? Maybe it wasn't the neighbor, I mean there's no proof per se, but man, the whole thing is definitely weird. If it wasn't the neighbor, then what on earth was he up to calling for a cat every morning? I have a lot of questions about this one, and I don't think that any of them are getting answered anytime soon. In our number 4 spot today, we have the photographer. This strange neighbor story is a very short but exceptionally effective one. The storyteller wrote just, quote, "They sent me pictures of myself mowing the lawn. I had no idea." Imagine getting a photo of yourself that you had no idea someone else took, let alone your neighbor. I feel like I would always feel as if someone's eyes were on me after that. Just full of paranoia to the brim. In our number 3 spot today, we have the eavesdropper. This neighbor story is about someone who loves to eavesdrop and get involved in things that certainly aren't their business, and they managed to take it way too far. This person wrote, quote, "We had this neighbor that was always in our business. He would tap our phone lines and listen to our problems and then call my grandfather to tell him what was going on with my parents' marriage. We would also find footprints in fresh snowfall walking all around our property and onto our deck. Weird dude." Honestly, I feel like I would be making up some crazy outlandish stories just to test to see if this man really was listening in. I would say that I had like treasure buried in the backyard or something and see if he tried to dig it up. This story certainly is strange, but the storyteller seems fairly casual about the whole experience, so it seems as though it's a story that stuck with them but didn't bother them too much. In our number 2 spot today, we have the vet visit. Okay, I don't know what it is with people and pets, but neighbors seriously need to leave other people's alone. This story starts out with the storyteller taking their dog for a pretty regular or standard visit to the vet. While on this visit, however, things start to take a turn when the vet tells them to stop feeding the dog human food. This confused them because they were quite strict about only feeding their dog food. Well, after a little investigation, it turns out that the neighbor this storyteller had, this one who would often call the police about this dog's behavior even though it was a nice, sweet Labrador that showed no aggression at all, yeah, apparently this neighbor had been leaning over the fence to feed the dog food scraps, mop water, and some other harmful things. This one might actually be worse than the neighbors who were stealing the cats. This is truly next level, and I'm glad that the vet was able to catch this and the storyteller could get to the bottom of it all. In our number 1 spot today, we have the neighbor across the hall. Okay guys, this one is definitely the most serious on this list, and it truly is terrifying. Basically, this storyteller's dad lives in an apartment building, and one day he gets a knock on the door and it turns out to be the police. They come in and start asking this man about his neighbor across the hall. They ask him if he's seen anything weird or that sort of thing, but the dad tells them no. He looks well put together, like a businessman, he's around 30, just nothing out of the ordinary, you know, just a regular guy who just lives across the hall. The police then explain that a 30-year-old woman is missing and that she was last seen on security camera footage walking into the building with that guy, but the security camera never captured either of them leaving. In the end, the police get a warrant and they notice a missing shower curtain and that there's golf clubs everywhere, and at this point they place the neighbor under arrest. Sadly, about 3 weeks later, the police found the missing woman, but someone had taken her life. They then go on to write, quote, "Then, about 2 months ago, they found more tapes. As the investigators went back to look at them, they discovered the man leaving the apartment with his golf bag. But, like I said earlier, all of the clubs were in his room. It definitely doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what is going on here at all. I guess this neighbor guy is now saying that it was an accident and he panicked and tried to hide it because he had a girlfriend." At the time the person posted this story, the guy's trial was coming up, and I'm sure it didn't exactly go well for him. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the entrepreneur. Okay, this neighbor story starts out actually quite nice before it takes one of the wildest turns I've ever seen. So basically, the storyteller starts out by explaining that their old neighbor was like the perfect neighbor. They were quiet, they were polite and cordial, and sometimes the two of them would even share a quick chat should they run into each other in the hall. Truly the dream neighbor. The story starts to take a different turn when the storyteller reveals that their nice neighbor is certainly in the business of selling illicit substances, we'll call them. But they also explain that all of his customers were also lovely and were sure to not make too much noise when they were coming by, even if it was late at night or early in the morning. Now, here's where the story takes quite the turn. Turns out that one night, some sort of altercation ensued, and this nice, quiet neighbor ended up taking the lives of 2 people who were at his door. Apparently, it all happened in the hallway, which was quite a gruesome scene afterwards. The storyteller has quite the twist again at the end when they write, quote, "It was crazy. Still, after he got sent to prison, a new guy moved in that played music constantly as loud as he possibly could. I'll take old be back any day. Honestly, I don't agree, but I completely understand. In our number 9 spot today, we have the plot twist. As if that one wasn't enough. Okay, this story is a short one, but man is it effective. They start out by saying, quote, I used to live in a house that was split into 2 apartments. My neighbor had the lower half, and I learned we had issues with the HVAC when their cigarette smoke came visibly pouring out our registers, stank up everything we owned. Okay, that definitely sucks. I'm sure it's a situation many people have dealt with before, and it would be really frustrating, and honestly, it's hazardous. Surprisingly though, this isn't the worst of it. There's one more sentence to the story, and it somehow still manages to take us on quite a journey. So after they wrote, quote, stake up everything we owned, they finished with, quote, then one of them stole my car. Okay, honestly, worse than the smoke, and also, I have a million questions about this. Starting with how, and ending with what happened after. I would love a follow-up on this one. In our number 8 spot today, we have a house's history. So there are places that have certain rules around what a selling agent would have to tell an interested buyer about the history of the house prior to purchasing. Some things are extremely important to some people and not at all to others. I mean, for example, some people don't really mind living in houses that were once the scene of a horrific crime. I personally feel like I wouldn't exactly be comfortable with that. Some things in some areas, however, don't have such widespread rules when it comes to these things, which means that sometimes new homeowners are in for quite a surprise, just like these ones. This story starts off, quote, when we moved in, he, meaning the neighbor, came over to tell us the house had previously burned down twice. News to us. Okay, that's interesting, but not too scary yet, but they continue on to say, quote, got the feeling he wanted to sort of brag about how he saved people from the fires. Then a few years later, after leaving our garage door open, we found our stored grill with all the unlit burners on and a bit of burnt paper sitting underneath. He's since disappeared, but we lock up our propane now. What in the world? How terrifying! The man disappeared? This is why I Google everything first. From places to people, I scour the internet prior because you never know, people are strange. In our number 7 spot today, we have the backdoor neighbor. This story starts off when a couple moved into a new house in the summer of 2019. Upon moving in, both of the neighbors on either side warned this couple about the neighbor who lived behind them, as they had been known to cause quite a bit of trouble. The first 6 months were fine, but things quickly took a turn. They go on to explain that, quote, their house sits on a hill behind ours, and so it overlooks the majority of our backyard due to the elevation change. Well, one night, morning technically, at about 3 a.m. we wake up to ring notifications from our phones showing video from our front doorbell. There's a man standing barefoot in a sleeveless shirt on our porch pounding on our front door. We give it 2 to 3 minutes just watching him on the app, thinking maybe he's drunk and has the wrong house, essentially giving him the benefit of the doubt. At this point, the guy at the door starts to yell, he's cursing, he's saying that he's gonna fight them, and then he leaves the front to head around the side of the house towards the backyard. They still have no idea who this is, so they of course call the police. Before the police arrive, the neighbor behind them turns on a huge spotlight that's shining into the storyteller's backyard, and they're thinking, okay, our neighbors, they know something's going on and they gave us some light to like check it all out or whatever. Turns out, not the case at all. Once the police arrive, it becomes clear that the spotlight neighbor is the one who was pounding on the door, and here's the reason. The neighbor said to the police when they showed up that he was angry because a few nights prior, in the middle of the night, the storyteller let his dog out in his own backyard, but that when he did it, he was in his boxers, and the neighbor was claiming that he did it on purpose to make him uncomfortable since their yard looks down on the storytellers and they could see everything. They then write, quote, he then followed this up to the police with evidence, which consisted of videos he had taken through our windows of my wife and I inside our own home doing totally normal things like chores, watching TV, etc. Nothing inappropriate or scandalous, not that it would have mattered anyway, we were in our own home. This story truly is next level. In the end, the police clearly understood that there was a breach of privacy, and it is said that the weird neighbors moved out a few months after and the couple celebrated that like it was a holiday. And I do not blame them one little bit. In our number 6 spot today, we have Sebald. Okay, so what happened to friendly neighbors coming over to ask to borrow a cup of sugar? Was that ever how things were, or is that just what movies in Hollywood fed us? It's gotta be made up, right? Or else, how did we get from that to this? This story reads, quote, "A guy named Sebald. He straight up smelled like tuna all the time. He'd come knock on our door to ask for random things in his robe. A rubber band, an apple slicer, a doorstop, like probably once a week. My bedroom door faced his kitchen, and sometimes I'd look over and see him lying on the floor. It was bizarre. Sebald, what in the world is going on? Are you okay? Listen, this isn't the scariest or the worst neighbor. The man just needs some items and likes lying on the floor. I'm certainly not judging, I'm just wondering why. I would have a lot of questions for Sebald if he was my neighbor, but hey, at least he's not out here causing harm. That's definitely more than we can say for some other people on today's list." In our number 5 spot today, we have the early riser. Okay, if anyone has any idea as to what could be going on in this one, please let me know, because from where I'm standing, it just is all extremely weird. This weird neighbor story explains that this specific neighbor loved to get up early. Not like absurdly early, but a solid 6 a.m. wake up every day, which is for sure a commitment. That isn't weird, a lot of people do that, but what a lot of people don't do after their 6 a.m. wake up every day is proceed to go out into the backyard of their home and fight a random mannequin while shouting at the top of their lungs. I guess the whole neighborhood is waking up at 6 a.m. every morning now, too, because this guy's got some steam he needs to release. Honestly, this would be the most annoying thing, but I'd also be very curious and concerned as to what this was all about. In our number 4 spot today, we have Goat Guy. Okay, this is definitely not an inherently terrifying story, but it is so bizarre that it has me just a little on edge. So basically, this short little explanation is, quote, "Old guy that lived next door when I was young would shower in the backyard, would buy goats to do his lawn. Eventually he stopped buying goats and would just set the lawn on fire. I mean, buying goats to eat your grass so you don't have to cut it is a very expensive method, but a method nonetheless. But setting it on fire? What an absolute hazard to yourself and everyone around you. There's just so much bizarrety going on in this one, I don't even know what to think." In our number 3 spot today, we have Linda Listen. This neighbor story starts off with a storyteller explaining that they have quite a few interesting neighbor stories from this one in particular, named Linda. They go on to write, quote, "Linda would often have men outside the apartment building that she locked out screaming her name. But the best story regards a boyfriend Linda had who insisted my roommate and I call him the Captain. About a week after meeting him, we came home to a wedding announcement for Linda and the Captain. Yes, his name was the Captain on the announcement. Exactly 1 week later still, the Captain was arrested outside of our apartment building for public intoxication at 2 a.m. while screaming, 'I've made a huge mistake. F you, Linda, a huge mistake. I'm ruined.' It seems as though this guy was no longer the Captain. I have no idea what happened here or what led to this demise, but I mean, I can't exactly say I'm surprised." In our number 2 spot today, we have Cat Lady. This story is from someone named Kate, and she starts off explaining that she had a cat named Donovan, and her strange neighbor was named Susan. Susan was single, in her 50s, seemed nice, and had a lovely garden. Kate then goes on to write, quote, "One summer we were going on vacation for a week. We asked if she could look after the cat while we were gone. She enthusiastically said yes and offered to have our cat stay at her house so it wouldn't get bored or lonely. How sweet of her." Kate then explains that they go away on vacation, everything's great, but when they came back and Kate's mom went to pick up the cat, things went awry. She explains that Susan was weirdly attached to this cat after 1 week, so much so that she was full on weeping when she was giving the cat back. Kate's mom was weirded out but thanked her, paid her, and then left. Kate then goes on to write that a few days later she woke up early and came to find out that Susan had walked the entire acre that separated their houses in order to try and look for Donovan. She was saying that she just needed to see her baby. Kate says that it was weird, but they let it go this time. But then she writes, quote, "Then one day we had let our cat out for a while, it was an indoor-outdoor cat, and when we called him to come in, he didn't come. We checked all the places he usually lounged and he was nowhere to be found. We searched for hours. Finally, after a day of searching, my dad said, 'Oh my god, Susan. Could she?' My parents quickly went over there to ask if she had seen the cat, and Susan vehemently denied knowing anything about where the cat was. She was visibly angry about being asked and then offered up, 'What do you think, that I stole him?' Then my mom started calling his name and whistling for him, and before Susan could get the door slammed, he strolled to the door from somewhere inside the house and greeted my mom with a meow. My mom was pissed. She started yelling about, 'If you ever steal our cat again, and I ought to call the police,' and left. He was an an indoor cat for the next few months until we moved again. Honestly, could you imagine your neighbor stealing your animal? I would have absolutely lost my mind. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Flyers. So this story starts out with a storyteller explaining to us that he lives in a fourplex that is mostly elderly people living in it, and that there was another fourplex across from them, and that was basically the situation for the entire block. So one night, when our storyteller is going out with some friends, as they're leaving his place, a neighbor of his comes out and a very hateful altercation ensues. The neighbor man yells some horrible things, the storyteller yells some things back, and that's when the neighbor makes some very serious threats, and then the storyteller just carries on with heading out for the night. Then he goes on to write, quote, "Well, when I got home, he had super glued my screen door completely shut, poured hamburger helper or something similar into my AC unit, scratched up my very expensive and still quite new Lexus SUV. This isn't where it ends though. They then take photos from the storyteller's Facebook and use them to spread a horrible, dangerous rumor about the storyteller. The insane neighbor used these photos to make posters and flyers spreading this rumor, and then on the back of them, quote, he stated where I worked, what time I left, what time I arrived, when I took lunch, and where I went on the weekends. It was very unusual. I ended up having to take him to court, file a restraining order against him after he showed up to my job, threatened to burn down my building, which I finally had enough and went outside to fight him. Luckily, my employees already had him cornered out in the parking lot. Thank God for restraining orders." You guys, this one is probably the most insane we have on this list. That's just next level and also very dangerous. I'm just glad the storyteller made it through this entire ordeal, and I hope that they were awarded with great neighbors from then on.
Starting off this dark list, and at number 10 we have The Secret Farmhouse. A 25-year-old man escaped from a farmhouse and ran to the nearest public place, which happened to be a bar. He guzzled down 5 beers, and then he asked the bartender for help. He told him that he hasn't been outside for 9 years, and he's not the only one. Dutch police were called to the scene, where they found a secret staircase behind a cupboard that led them down to the basement. Inside this secret room, they found a man and his 6 children living inside of a small confined space. Some of these kids had no idea that the other people existed. They thought that they were the only ones left on Earth, and they were waiting for the world to end. But as it turns out, someone in their family was keeping them locked up in this secret farmhouse for 9 years. Is this real life right now? The police were unable to find their mother, and they suspect that she was either the one that did this or that she is dead somewhere. An unknown uncle in prison is at number 9. This scary family secret comes from Reddit. Apparently this person had an uncle in prison, but no one in her family ever told her what he was serving time for. The family never talked about him, and if he was brought up in conversation, everyone would just simply change the topic. But one night, she was watching a TV documentary about horrific crimes that happened in Perth, Australia. And guess what? One of them was about David and Catherine Burney and how they brutally murdered a call girl. Well, as it turns out, this guy had the exact same name as her uncle in prison. Could this be the same guy? Could this be your uncle? Well, she turned to her mom, who said, "So I guess you could put the 2 to 2 together. Well, I guess that's one way to find out that you have an uncle who murdered someone." Not the best way of finding out, but yeah. The murderous couple is in at number 8. Gerald and Alice Uden appear to be the most wholesome couple. They regularly attended church, and they seem to be super nice, genuine. They're very generous people. Well, don't be fooled by them, because both of them were hiding their own deep, dark secret for decades. Apparently they were both married to other people they met before. Alice shot her husband in the head and then decided to hide his body in a gold mine. Whereas Gerald confessed to shooting his ex-wife and stepchildren with a rifle that she had bought him as a present. I mean, is this real life right now? What are the odds of these two people finding each other? Did they meet at a Killed My Spouse group meeting, or maybe they swiped right on the Kill Me app or on Killed Before app? It's also crazy how many years went by before they were finally caught by the police. This story is absolutely insane. Next up on our list, at number 7, antifreeze. A mother and daughter confessed to poisoning members of their family with antifreeze. Let me give you guys a quick backstory. The father died without warning, so they attributed it to natural causes. Well, 5 months later, her autistic son died from what seemed to be seizure-related complications. And then the following year after that, her daughter needed emergency medical attention, and this is for an organ failure. Yeah, something about this just doesn't seem right. The family's pastor thought so too, so he reached out to local law enforcement who were able to get a confession out of her. And her motives were pretty messed up. She wanted her husband gone because of his temper, she couldn't deal with her autistic son, and her daughter racked up too much debt from college. So she had to go as well. She was gonna keep her other 2 daughters because she so loved them. But get this, the police found a diary belonging to her youngest daughter, and she wrote about how she helped her mother plan and execute the murders, and her goal was to eliminate the entire family until it was just her and her mother left. I mean, I can't even deal with this messed up family, so let's move on. The closet child comes in at number 6. For 3 years, a young boy was hidden inside of a locked closet while he was sedated by sleeping pills given to him by his mother. When neighbors asked Veronica Aguilar where her son was, she told them that he was placed in an institution in Mexico. But her 3 other children who slept on a bed just outside of the closet door knew the truth, but they were forbidden by their mother from saying anything to anyone. Sadly, this little boy's life came to an end when police finally discovered his malnourished body inside of the closet. It's insane because so many people like teachers, social workers, therapists, they all knew that he was a victim of abuse, but somehow they lost track of him, and because of their carelessness, his mother was able to lock him inside of a closet for a very long time until he ultimately passed away. Number 5, we have a crazy story about a girl who was raised by a man who killed her parents. Victoria Montenegro thought that her adoptive parents were kind and generous people who took her in after her real parents were killed in a shootout in Buenos Aires in 1976. Well, as it turns out, that was a complete lie. When she turned 24 years old, she discovered that the couple who raised her was part of the military regime responsible for her parents' disappearance. Her birth parents were actually abducted, abused, and assassinated by this group when she was only 4 months old. So her adoptive father took this opportunity to falsify her documents, hide her identity, and raise her as his own. This is just so messed up, so twisted. All of these years, she was being raised by a family that actually killed her parents and stole her identity. A serial killer in hiding brings us to number 4. Back in 1971, 13-year-old Charlie Brandt went into a full homicidal rampage. Without any warning, he shot his father in the back and then shot his pregnant mother while she was in the bath. He went to kill his other sister, but luckily his gun jammed. His father barely survived the shooting, but his mother wasn't so lucky. But because of his age, prosecutors never charged him with his mother's death. He was able to walk free and live a normal life. His family never brought up that night ever again, and he just went on as nothing ever happened. Well, in 2004, Brandt went on to brutally stab his wife 7 times in the chest, and he even decapitated her and ripped her heart out. Afterwards, he committed suicide. It's crazy because no one knew that he had serial killer tendencies except for his family, who kept his secret after all of these years. Now at number 3, dead bodies in the garage. Darren West spent 10 years of his life thinking that he only had 3 children with his ex-wife. But in 2006, this reality was shattered. He was serving time in prison for drug charges, but he was being released. While he was making arrangements to stay with his ex-wife, he came to the shocking truth. He found a dead baby in her garage, and it wasn't the only one. Between 1996 and 2006, Megan Huntsman had secretly given birth to 7 babies, and she choked them all to death. She turned her garage into a makeshift graveyard and kept this family's secret for years. As it turns out, she was addicted to meth, and that was her motive for killing these poor kids. I just can't believe that she was able to hide her pregnancy and murders this whole time. She probably would have taken this dark secret to her grave. The Turpin children makes its way onto this list at number 2. David and Louise Turpin managed to abuse their 13 children for years until one daughter was able to escape and tell the police. These poor kids were in such a controlling and abusive environment and had to do whatever it took to survive. In the media, their house was being called a house of horrors because some of the children were so far removed from the world. I mean, they didn't even know what medicine or the police were until they were finally rescued. They were only fed once a day and given a shower once a year. No one in the neighborhood had any idea what was going on inside of that house, and the parents managed to get away with this for a very long time. They're able to get away with their dark secret for many, many years. Now at number 1, we have a girl who was held captive for 24 years. This next story is a pretty famous case that emerged back in 2008. A woman named Elizabeth Fritzl, well, she told police that she had been captive for the past 24 years by her own father. Joseph Fritzl had assaulted, abused, and hurt her numerous times during her, imprisonment inside of her family basement. His abuse resulted in the birth of 7 children, where 3 of them remained in captivity with Elizabeth. One of them died shortly after birth, and Joseph disposed of his body in an incinerator, and the other 3 were brought up by him and his wife as their own. This secret went on for 24 years until finally the police discovered what was really going on. The story is so much more messed up, but I definitely don't want to get into all the horrific details. All I know is that Elizabeth is finally free, and I hope that one day she'll be able to move past this. I feel so bad.
Now, starting us off for number 10 is The Truth. Now this one's from a girl on Reddit who said she was named after her great aunt who died in a motorcycle accident a few years before she was born. She was told not to talk about her to her great grandma because the loss was just too much to handle and relive again, which was fair enough. No one wants to relive the death of their daughter. Now when the user was 24 years old, her great grandma passed away, and after the wake, her great uncle got drunk and just starts exposing everyone. Now in casual passing, he mentioned the great aunt's suicide, and the user was like, wait, what suicide? Grandma told me she had died in a motorcycle accident. And he replied saying, yeah, that was the cover story. She just didn't want to tell anyone the real reason she had to give a closed casket for her daughter's funeral. And at this point, the whole truth and nothing but the truth had to be spilled because too much had already been said. Now apparently the great aunt was a lesbian in love with another girl from university, and they had made a plan to be together without their parents' knowledge. Now when the user's great grandmother figured out the plans, she sent the great aunt halfway across the country in order to separate the two. But the girls had a contingency plan if this were to happen, and of course they knew it would. They made a suicide pact. The great grandma's homophobia had caused 2 innocent girls to kill themselves, but she admitted she never forgave herself for it, and it haunted her till the day she died. The user was honestly shocked at all the lies she'd been told about the woman she was literally named after, and the fact that everyone just accepted this lie just because of the great grandma's shame. This whole story just pissed me off, but then again, this whole list is gonna piss me off. Love is love! Love is love. But coming in at number 9 is The Boyfriend. This one actually broke my heart and was shared by a Reddit user. Now she said her grandma grew up in Costa Rica in the 40s, and at the time her mother was dating a guy that just seemed off. The user's grandma and her sister hated him, but their mother insisted that he was a good guy and that he took care of them, so they kind of just shut up about it. But one night the guy decides that he's actually done being nice and ends up murdering the mother in her bed by beating her skull with a hammer. Blood is everywhere on the walls, the ceiling, soaking the mattress. Now the user's grandma and sister come home to the scene and their mum dead in bed, and the boyfriend obviously nowhere to be found. They called the police, who took the body away, did a cursory examination of the crime scene, and then left. Can you just get this? The police left these 2 12 and 9-year-old girls in a house where their mother had just been murdered. But the even worse part was that they only had 1 bed in the house, and that was the blood-soaked mattress, and if they threw that away, they'd have to sleep on the floor. So they decided to just flip the mattress over, but then the user's grandma just ended up getting drenched in all the blood the mattress had soaked up. At number 8, we have Who Are the Parents? Now this one also comes from a girl on Reddit who said when she was 21, her older sister confessed she had been raped by a stranger when she was 17 years old. The user was shocked that she hadn't been told this before, since they came from a really big family and everyone just kind of knew everything. But then she got to thinking, her older sister also happened to be 17 years older than her, and people always commented on how the siblings could be twins. And one time for a class, the user was asking her mum questions about her birth story, but she just couldn't remember the answers for most of the questions, like who was in the room at the time, when was she born, she just didn't know. To make matters more complicated, the parents were very religious and would never have condoned an abortion, so the secret here is that the user is adamant that she is the product of her sister's rape and that her grandparents have been pretending to be her real parents this whole time. Can you just imagine if your sister was your real mum this whole time? The user actually never had the guts to ask her sister about it, since if it wasn't true, then she just made this whole traumatic rape story about herself, which is just very narcissistic. Like, honestly, if that was me, I would have to ask. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't ask. But then if it wasn't true, I would just disown myself and just leave. Now, filling our number 7 slot is the rage. Now, this one's from Reddit user SarXNa, who shared that her great-grandpa and grandma had 17 children together, which, wow, like what a different time it was, but even then, that's a lot of bloody kids. Either way, the user found out that one of the children ended up becoming pregnant during her teens, but it was because her father had raped her. Now, when the mother found out, she was so angry and filled with rage, not at her husband for raping their daughter, no, that would be absurd. She was livid at her daughter, who she then pushed down the stairs, and so the daughter and baby both died. That's just shocking. Why would you get mad at your daughter because your husband raped her? Now, at number 6 is the uncle. Honestly, I read a lot of stories for this video, and I feel like a running theme in all of them was just evil uncles, which is just weird because I feel like uncles are usually just always so fun and nice, but clearly they are not. Now, this one's from Reddit user GarbageCat88, who said their great aunt fell into a current at Niagara Falls and then got swept over the falls and ended up dying. Now, most people ruled it out as an accidental death, but everyone in their family begged to differ. They believed the great aunt was actually pushed into the water by her alcoholic, abusive husband. Now, the user's grandma told them that way back in the day, domestic abuse was seen as taboo and shameful, and so the whole thing was just kind of swept under the rug until the husband got remarried. The great uncle was very quickly arrested after his second marriage for nearly beating his wife to death. Dude, what is your issue? Go to rehab, buy a punching bag, and if neither of those things solve your issues, then don't get married. Plain and simple. So this Reddit user said that as their granddad got older, the user and their mum would look after him. Now, the grandpa had dementia, but he would share stories from his life, from the war, from his youth, and so forth. Now, one day he started telling them about his wife. He had liked her from before he went off to fight during World War II, but never really acted on it since he was poor and didn't think he was worthy to marry her. Now, that's why he even enlisted, because he wanted to become respectable, but while he was away, their grandma ended up getting married to someone her parents approved of. But her first husband was horrible. He'd beat her, verbally abuse her, and even make her sleep in the barn outside in the cold. Now, the only reason she didn't divorce him is because it just wasn't the done thing at the time. It was looked down upon, as you guys probably know. But when the grandpa finally came back from war, he was told she was married, that he could go visit her, and so he did, just to say hello. Old flame, old fling, you know how it is. When he got there, he found her beaten and bloody and broken and took her to a doctor and convinced her to divorce the man and get out of that situation. She did, and then they got married a year later, but the ex-husband would continuously show up and harass her. Now, the grandpa had always said the ex ended up moving away, but in a lucid moment recalling the story, he said this: "I hated him for what he'd done to her. I knew he'd never leave her alone. I made sure he'd never bother her or any woman again." So he basically just confessed to killing this man in the 40s in the Midwest, and not just that, he got away with it too. At number 4 is the video game break. Now, when you've just been playing a PlayStation game for like 3 hours straight and you're just not getting anywhere, and you're like, you know what, okay, I can quickly pause this, get a drink, get a snack right about now, you know how it is. Now, that's an expected video game break, whereas this one is the farthest thing from it. Now, this one came from an anonymous person who said their grandma was watching them play video games when all of a sudden she made a startling confession. She shared that when she was super young, she snuck out of their house late at night, and a man who lived on her street ended up taking her to his basement and raping her. She ended up getting pregnant, and after she gave birth, her mum and doctor took the baby away and smothered it to death. And she didn't even have a choice in the matter. The person had no idea what to say to this unprovoked confession, so they just hugged her and apologized on many people's behalf, but their grandma had closed off again by then and just said she didn't want to talk about it anymore. She just had to get it off her chest. There's so many stories of this that I read, and I'm just like, my heart goes out to all these people that such horrible things happen to you guys. Now, filling our number 3 slot is the disappearing act. This one kind of made me laugh a bit. Like, I know it's not funny, but this aunt is just on another level of that I just want to attain at one point in my life. So an anonymous person shared that they have an aunt that literally disappeared off the face of the earth. It was the 40s or 50s in Portland, and she was about 20 something at the time. But nothing was wrong. She didn't have a problematic life, she was happy, she had a job, didn't have any family problems, but one day she just never came back from work. But also, I just want to add that just because nothing seems wrong with her or her life on the outside doesn't mean she was happy on the inside. I mean, you never really know what people are going through. truly, so just want to throw that out there. Anyway, her family had no clue what happened or where she went, and they assumed she got kidnapped or was killed or just died somewhere. That was literally in the story, that she just died somewhere. How casual is that? Anyway, 5 years later, the aunt's brother is in Chicago for a business trip, and while walking down a street, he sees his sister. He calls out her name to make sure it's her, and she turns around and he's like, what the hell? Before bombarding her with a bunch of questions, which she obviously dodges. To clear the air, she invites him to her apartment, promising to explain everything. They reach the apartment, and before they get started, she says she really needs to buy some cigarettes from across the street because this was all a massive shock for her as well. He lets her go, and then again, she never bloody comes back. Like, what? Like, don't let her go anywhere alone if she has a history of pulling this crap, dude. Like, you had one job to not let her out of your sight, and that's exactly what you did. Chaperone her to the cigarette shop. You don't let her go alone. No. Now at number 2 is the drugs. And this just pissed me off so much I can't even tell you. Now this Reddit user shared that he found out that his dad used to drug his mum for years while they were married and then proceeded to rape her when she passed out. Now as soon as the user found that out, he helped his mum divorce him, and now the family has no relationship with the dad whatsoever. But it gets worse. While the user was dating his now wife, she once had some drinks with his dad and just was not waking up. Now she had just turned 21 at the time, so the user just assumed she couldn't handle her alcohol, but after years of knowing her, he realized she can handle her drink very well and she's never been unwakeable. So the user is damn sure his dad drugged his wife and maybe raped her, but he has no proof. This whole story just made me absolutely sick to my stomach. Finally, at number 1 is the secret family. This one blew my mind, but it's actually not as uncommon as you'd think. So this story was shared by an anonymous girl who has 2 brothers and parents who have been married for over 35 years. I remember that detail. Now one year over Christmas, she was doing some family research and found that her dad's name brought up birth results for 2 other people other than her and her siblings. Now the births were registered to the north of England, which was a red flag straight away because her dad used to work in that area for 5 years 20 years prior. So keep in mind, their parents were married by that point. He would go up there for 2 weeks, then be home for 2 weeks, and so forth. Now the girls did some more digging and found the 2 kids on Facebook, and they were now grown women, and their last names were also her dad's last name. Instead of contacting them, since she assumed they didn't know either, she found and contacted their mum. She posed as her dad's relative, and the woman confirmed her dad was the father of her kids and even sent photocopies of their birth certificates. Now the girl ends up calling the woman and confessing she's his daughter as well and had no idea about any of this, and the woman obviously breaks down crying. She shared that they had met in a pub and her dad had told her that he was single, and a few months later they were expecting their first child, and a year later the second. She thought he went back to Wales every 2 weeks for work, but he would call every other day from a phone box because apparently he didn't own a landline. Already shady, so many red flags. Who doesn't own a landline? Come on now. And one day he went back to Wales for work and just straight up never came back. The woman tried to contact the company he worked for, but his contract was up, so he didn't work there anymore. And since he had lied about where he lived in Wales, the woman couldn't find him either. So the girl's dad just left this woman with 2 kids and literally did the biggest case boy ghosting I've ever seen. Like, I thought I got ghosted bad, like this is horrible. The girl didn't even have the heart to confront her dad or tell her mum about the other 2 kids. Oh my god, I don't even know what I would do if I found that out. First of all, I would tell everyone. Would I? That's a secret that would ruin a family for sure. Oh, but the truth has to come out, you guys!
Starting off at number 10 now, we have the Grand Dragon. This one comes from Betamax V2, who said, "A great uncle of mine passed away when I was a little boy. The family met at his house after the funeral to start packing things up and all, as he had no children and his wife died many years before him. My great uncle was a highly respected member of his small town. He was a banker of some sort, deacon in the church, and all those things that made him a good person. Well, tucked away in the attic, not covered by any dust mind you, was a large wooden trunk. Inside this trunk were the purple robes of a KKK Grand Dragon, various member listings, meeting notes, and all other sorts of things related to the KKK. Turns out that my great uncle was a very active, although very much secretive, member of the regional chapter of the KKK. Okay, I think we've already started up here with this video. Can you guys even imagine finding out that your relative, someone who was respected respected and loved by his family and friends, was a member of the KKK, probably the most famous white supremacy group of all time. I guess you'd have a lot of questions after that, especially for your family. Like, how didn't they know? Moving on to number 9 now, we have the milk. This one comes from Kleinboy, 1987. Now he said, my great-grandfather hit his wife with a fire poker and slit her throat. He then proceeded to blow his head apart with a shotgun. He sat down in a rocking chair and used his cane to push the trigger, all over an argument of whether it was too cold for me to walk to the grocery store to get some milk. That's it. That's the whole story. That's everything. There's nothing more to help us try and wrap our heads around what happened here. The couple were arguing over whether this storyteller would be alright getting milk due to the cold, and he murdered her over it and then killed himself. Now I'm guessing by the fact that they're referred to as great-grandparents that they were pretty old when this happened. What would cause someone who's been in a marriage for decades and decades to just suddenly snap like that? I think there's more to this story, but honestly, I'm not even sure I want to know. At the number 8 spot now, we have Dog Heaven. This story comes from New Orpheus about his wife. He said, my wife and I were reminiscing about our childhood pets one day. When I shared how hard it was when my cherished dog had to be put down, she got to thinking. All of her childhood dogs were killed by semis. Now normally the thought of a dog getting loose and being run over by a semi-truck isn't that far-fetched. However, it had just clicked with her that her childhood home was in the countryside, down a long gravel road. The nearest highway was really far away. She decided that the next time she talked to her dad, she would find out what really happened. After all, now she is an adult and can handle the truth that a 7-year-old couldn't. Well, her dad just sort of smiled at her and said, oh honey, I never lied to you. Your childhood dogs were indeed hit by a semi-automatic. Yeah, a semi-automatic rifle. Now, to be fair here, it sounds like her dad was putting down the dogs when they were old or very sick instead of taking them to the vet to do it. I hear that's more common in certain rural communities around the world. I'm passing no judgment here. I just thought it would be a shocking story because she genuinely thought they were all getting hit by semis, as in semi-trucks, when it was actually semi-automatic rifles. It's quite a big difference between those two things. Next up at number 7 now, guys, we have the judge. This one comes from Thing, who said, the real reason my aunt moved back to my hometown was she was briefly kidnapped by some bad guys she displeased in her work as a judge. The guy held her at gunpoint and told her she could either leave town in the next 24 hours or be taken back in. I was like 8 at the time, so everyone just told me she moved back because she missed us all. I found out about it when my brother and I were rehashing old stuff 10 years later. Now I'm sure all the adults in this family had mixed feelings about the auntie returning. Yay, auntie's back in town for good because she misses us, but oh no, it's actually because she was told to leave at gunpoint where she worked as a judge. That's really scary. It's also kind of scary to think that some criminals can subvert justice like that. Maybe you guys think this is exceptionally rare though. I hope it is. Moving on to number 6 now, guys, we have the other child. This one comes from Egg Coroner, who said, I just found out that my grandparents wanted more kids but were having trouble getting pregnant for a second time. They adopted a toddler-aged brother and sister when my mother was 7. Soon after, my grandmother got pregnant. The girl then died from a very mysterious fall down the stairs, and the boy was quietly given to another family. They never ever spoke of either child from that day forward. I thought she was pulling my leg, but a quick search turned up the girl's death record. I was never close to that grandmother and can't help but think back to every weird aspect of that woman and all the strange relationships she had with her family. Wow. That one is really crazy. I think what the storyteller is trying to suggest is that when the couple finally did get pregnant, they then didn't want their adopted children anymore, and so they staged a fatal accident for the girl and just sent the boy away forever. That is really dark. I presume that it was their mother who told them this story and they thought, there's no way that's true, you must be pulling my leg. But yeah, I don't know, man, I've never heard a good joke that sounds anything like this. Coming in number 5 now, we have the photos. Conte Vincero said, we found a picture of 2 great aunts arm in arm with Hitler. We also found a signed photograph of Mussolini. Yeah, their great aunts were apparently best mates with Hitler. What an awful surprise to find out. I mean, the scary thing about this story is pretty clear. I guess the only positive to take away from it is that maybe their grandmother wasn't all chummy with Hitler. Maybe it was just two sisters. Clutching at straws here, I think. As for the signed picture of Mussolini, I think they should sell it and give the money to a nice charity. That's something that would have really annoyed him. At the number 4 spot now, we have life insurance. This one comes from Cotton Weasel, who said, I have a second cousin that murdered his siblings and parents for insurance money. He didn't get away with it, but only spent around 20 years in prison. He's out now, but no one talks about him or will speak to him. The only reason I even know is my parents warn me if he ever reaches out to me that I shouldn't talk to him. I managed to find out about him and what happened by Googling him. Unreal. I mean, for me personally, unless something awful has happened, there should never be a good reason to kill your parents and siblings. I actually can't think of any reason off the top of my head. That's pretty obvious for normal people, but to do it because of life insurance money, that's insane. I'm glad to hear that he got locked up, but yeah, I do think 20 years might not be enough for slaughtering a whole family in cold blood. Someone in the comments section of this story replied by saying, if he does contact you, the first thing you tell them is, I don't have any life insurance. That's some good but also quite dark humorous advice there. Moving on to the number 3 spot now, guys, we have the uncle. This one comes from Dogma 3721, who said, an uncle I've never met, my mom's brother, killed my mom's parents when he was 16 in a fit of rage and burnt down their home in an attempt to cover it up. I've never met him, as he has been in jail on a life sentence since before I was born. I was only informed of his existence because my dad was blackmailing my mom with this. I mean, aside from it being scary, this story's just tragic. It's tragic enough to know that your grandparents were murdered and you never got to meet them, especially when you find out that it was your own uncle who did it. I bet it's even more horrifying for the storyteller's mum, especially now that the dad is apparently blackmailing her with this. I mean, that's a pretty scummy thing to do, as if she hasn't already been through enough in her life. Sorry, this is supposed to be a scary video, and now I'm just angrily ranting about things. At the number 2 spot now, we have the past life. This is just strange on every level. See if you can follow along with it. Someone on Reddit said, in 1976, my father was in the military and traveled to Guatemala after an earthquake. During the cleanup, he was at the Mayan site of Mixco Viejo. There were several burial sites overturned there. For some reason, unknown to me, he brought back the remains of a female Mayan Indian. He claimed to have loved her in a past life. These remains are still in the box in our attic. They are mostly dust now, with a part of the skull left. My father died in 1986, so I cannot ask him about it. My mother and sisters claimed her ghost followed them wherever they moved until my dad died. I am skeptical of that claim. I also have a half brother in Puerto Rico who is in his 30s that I will never meet. I only know his name is Ricky, and my dad had a fling with a Puerto Rican woman while stationed there in the army sometime in the 70s. Okay, breathe. There's a lot to break down there. I think taking the remains of a stranger from their homeland is very strange, as it is probably illegal too, but his family didn't even do anything when he came back with that. I know they said they didn't know, but now they do, and the remains are apparently still just sitting there in the attic. Weird. As for the last bit of the story, someone else pointed out that pop star Ricky Martin was born in Puerto Rico in the 1970s. Could it be him? And finally, number 1 now, we have Chucky. Disclaimer for this one, guys, this is pretty disturbing. Beastie J said, my mother told me a story about being at a small funeral in the late 1950s in East Texas. The deceased was mentally challenged and the family was relieved to have the child at peace. During the service, the coffin began to rock and crying was heard. Then she was taken outside and watched as the coffin was carried to the cemetery next to the church and hurriedly buried. I was telling my kids this story years later, and my mother walked into the room, listened for a moment, and asked, are you telling them about Uncle Chucky? Okay, I honestly didn't even know whether or not to include this. I was back and forth for about 10 minutes. It's horrifying. I'm really hoping this story isn't actually real. I'm hoping it's very exaggerated, or maybe their mother was just messing around with them. This is really shocking stuff. Did this family really bury their mentally challenged son alive? Personally, I don't think so. I think even with the different attitudes of the 1950s, this is still the stuff of horror and fiction rather than real life and fact. I mean, it's my job to just present people's stories as they are told, but yeah, I want to hear if you guys think this one is legit.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Let's Celebrate. Okay, so this story is one wild ride, and it is honestly actually pretty terrifying. One night, a young woman was coming home late after she had been out having a few alcoholic beverages. Her creepy neighbor unfortunately witnessed this and for some reason decided to head to her front door with her. Her birthday had recently passed, and so when her weird neighbor tried to give her a hug, she just assumed it was him trying to be nice, but things quickly got even more strange. As she was trying to get into her own home, he kept insisting he should come in and have a drink with her so that they could celebrate more appropriately. Absolutely not. This woman was thinking quick because she decided to tell him that she couldn't find her keys, and then she quickly pulled out her phone and she said she was calling someone who might have them. She was actually calling her cousin though, and she told him how scared she was. He lived close by, so he jumped out of bed and drove really quickly to come and pick her up. I wish this was the end of the story, but she explains that shortly after this creepy night, her neighbor actually ended up poisoning one of her dogs just out of pure pettiness. That is so insane. In our number 9 spot today, we have the upstairs neighbor. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far, because it really helps us out. This story comes from someone who explains that they live in an apartment building. Their neighbors directly above them are the ones having some extremely fishy behavior. Apparently, it is not abnormal to hear this couple screaming and arguing with each other, which is quite a thing to have to get used to. But here's where things turn sinister. Our storyteller explains that she hasn't seen the wife for at least 3 months now, which obviously isn't normal. And now, suddenly, the husband says that he's going to Malaysia for a while, but our storyteller feels like he's going forever, considering he is also selling his apartment. And we still don't know where the wife is. I'm hoping that maybe they just decided to separate since they were obviously arguing all the time, and that nothing more sinister is going on here. If I was their neighbor, I'm sure my mind would definitely be racing as well, though. In our number 8 spot today, we have this suspicious behavior. This story starts off with a description of the family next door. There are 3 of them, a husband, a wife, and their 2-year-old daughter. Apparently, the husband has always been super weird and gave off some bad feelings. He had a really expensive car, and apparently basically all he did was drive it and wash it. So, one day, the police came knocking on our storyteller's door, and the police explained that apparently the husband and wife next door had supposedly gotten a divorce, but they wanted to know if they happened to know the whereabouts of the wife and daughter because they could not locate them. Our storyteller didn't know anything about their whereabouts, but gave what info she did know, which was that she had a 2-year-old and that she was maybe pregnant and that she drove a white Jeep. After this police visit, they didn't hear anything else, but of course kept their eyes and ears peeled. A few months after the police visit, the creepy husband is outside cleaning his expensive car, and this is when our storyteller sees the wife's white Jeep in the garage of the house. If she had run off, why would she leave her car? The creepy husband saw our storyteller see the Jeep, and just a few short days later, he ended up selling it. This could all just be a coincidence, but it certainly is all a little suspicious. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Skull Stealer. This next story is one that our storyteller luckily didn't have to witness, but it definitely is still quite strange. Apparently, this neighbor man was out and about searching for gold one day, and on his way back, he ended up being pulled over for some reason. The police ended up searching this man's car when they found something I don't think anyone was expecting. They found a real human skull. Sinister or not, why would you ever have something like that in the back of your car? This guy's excuse is that he found it while he was out searching and thought it belonged to an indigenous American. This man was most definitely arrested, and unfortunately, our storyteller doesn't know how the rest of this story panned out, but if it wasn't already clear, if you ever find a human skull, please don't take it home with you. In our number 6 spot today, we have Always Watching. This story is about the family that lived across the street from our storyteller when they were in high school. Our storyteller would walk to and from school every day, and while the mornings were normal, when he was coming home every day is when things got very weird. This family across the street would sit and stare out the window at this guy every single day as he returned from school. I couldn't imagine this happening happening to me once, let alone every single day, but that truly sounds like an absolute nightmare. To make things just a little more strange, it apparently wasn't uncommon for them to get phone calls from their scary neighbors' phone numbers, but when they answered, there just wasn't anyone on the other end. I feel like I would have immediately put my house up for sale or something, because every night I would feel like I would need to sleep with one eye open. In our number 5 spot today, we have Stay Away. This story comes from someone who had some weird neighbors when they were around 9 or 10 years old. The people who actually lived next door were a middle-aged couple, and while they didn't have any kids of their own, they had 3 nieces who were around the same age as him, so they would play together often. One day the couple invited our storyteller to church with them. There isn't necessarily anything inherently wrong with that, but what happens next is where things turned a little strange. This couple then proceeded to explain why this child should come to church with them, which already sounds creepy. They began to explain that the world was about to end and that they were preparing for that. These fully grown adults literally told the child that if he wanted to live, he should go to church with them. I have a strong feeling that if he wanted to live, the best thing to do would be to absolutely not go to church with them under any circumstances. Who knows what church they were going to, but there's no way it was good. In our number 4 spot today, we have This Dangerous Fence. This story comes from someone from a family with 4 siblings for a total of 5 kids. They were all pretty rambunctious and unfortunately had the pleasure of living next to a family with 2 children, both of which were, of course, very well behaved. Obviously, the neighbor dad didn't take too kindly to living next door to a bunch of wild children, considering he had 2 perfect little angels. But he certainly took things way too far. One day our storyteller was climbing around on the fence that separated the 2 properties, and this set off the neighbor dad. Instead of doing literally anything normal, he decided to do one of the most messed up things he could. He took those nails that are used for carpets to grip the flooring and stuck them in bars of wood, which he then placed on top of the fence. Keep in mind that our storyteller is around 5 years old at this time. So every time he would try to climb to the top, he would be stuck by a nail, which would then cause him to fall off. Luckily, our storyteller never got seriously injured or anything from this, but how weird is it for the neighbor dad to react like that? In our number 3 spot today, we have The Rose Garden. This story comes from someone's aunt and is about a neighbor she had in the 70s and 80s. This neighbor was harmless but had quite a creepy pastime. This neighbor volunteered at a blood bank, which is obviously great, but since the 70s and 80s were pretty much just a free-for-all, there was an insane blood bank rule that allowed this neighbor lady to be able to take home the bags of blood that were expired and would be thrown out. I truly cannot believe that was a thing, but I guess this lady was resourceful. She would take these bags of blood and then use them as fertilizer for her garden. Our storyteller's aunt explains that you would see her out there on her knees, digging around with a big floppy sun hat, just working human blood into the soil around her roses. They end off this story by explaining that all of the flowers in her garden were truly magnificent, and I guess maybe she really was onto something. In our number 2 spot today, we have The Next Door Dentist. This story comes from someone whose neighbor was a dentist, and he lived with his wife, and they apparently had one creepy child. Our storyteller explains that this weird family next door once absolutely freaked out on them for planting some flowers alongside their fence. They didn't go into detail about why, but the dentist family screamed as they said they didn't want anyone digging up their land. That's a reasonable request for sure, but also very, very suspicious. The dentist family ended up moving out 2 years after this strange incident, and our storyteller didn't really think much of them until 3 years after that. In an absolutely wild but not surprising turn of events, the dentist's dad ended up being arrested for kidnapping his patients. Our storyteller still has never had confirmation, but truly believes that there are still bodies located down there. In our number 1 spot today, we have Peeping Tom. Okay, so this one is truly one of the creepiest things I have ever heard. This story comes from a man who lives with his wife, and they have a downstairs neighbor who is certainly something else. First, this creepy neighbor approaches the wife and says to her that he can hear her and her husband all the time, with a super creepy and sinister grin on his face. which is absolutely horrifying to even think of. This is already creepy, but this story unfortunately gets worse. One day the wife was painting the porch of the house and accidentally dropped a paintbrush. She bent down to pick it up and sadly had to see what no one should have to see. Through the slits in the deck, she saw this creepy neighbor's eyes staring up at her. Tell me why this creepy man was laying under the porch, staring up at her, being a weirdo peeping Tom. They have no idea how long he was there for, and honestly, they probably don't even want to know.